For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shruthi Madhusudhan. I have just graduated from doing law at King's College London, and I am due to start my postgraduate LPC in 1 week's time in London, and then I'll be starting my job as a future trainee solicitor at an American law firm called White & Case that operates in London. So I am from Nottingham, but I'm primarily kind of London-based for the moment. So the way I thought would be most helpful for all of you who are interested in getting into law, or perhaps having a career in law, is splitting up my kind of presentation into a few key sections, and I'll share my slides in due course. So I think I'm going to start a little bit about, why law? It's a very basic question, but I think if you're interested in this subject, you're interested in this career, then it is useful asking yourself, what is it about law that interests you? Because you'll probably have to explain that further down the line if you want to take it forward as a career. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about applying for a law degree. I'm not sure if I recognize everyone on this call, but I would assume that we're all sort of like year 10 and above. So I'll be talking a little bit about GCSEs, A-levels, the LNAT, and applying for Oxbridge. After that, I'll talk a little bit about, different types of lawyers. There's a lot of confusion, I think, compared to different countries. In the UK, it's not as simple as just being a lawyer. There are lots of different types of lawyers. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit more specific to my specialty, which will be commercial corporate law, and how to get into that. So I'm just going to share my slides. What would be good is I'm not too fussed if people put questions as we go along. I'll just answer them at the end. Because I know, you may have a question that gets into your head and then you forget it by the end of the session. So feel free to put questions along in the chat box. So I'm just going to share my slides now. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? I'm going to take that as a yes. So yeah, getting into law. First off, let's talk about why law. I think it's a question, if you're interested in applying to law, you're interested in being a lawyer, something about justice interests you, then I think asking the question to yourself, why would I want to do a degree or a career in law is very important. And for many people, it's deeply personal, or it could just be an interest. And for me, why I wanted to study law at university level and then go ahead and become a lawyer is I found reading about cases and reading about different legal systems really, really interesting. Kind of law is not just what's written in legislation or written in a statute. It's also very political. It's also very much linked to current affairs. It's linked to international relations. It's linked to global politics and global policy. It covers a vast range of material, and you can study all different types of law at university level, from kind of criminal law and looking at really horrible crimes and dissecting them, to more of these bigger issues linking to international law and international arbitration, where countries actually have cases against each other and battle each other in court. So it really spans a massive breadth of different topics and different areas of interest. The second thing I'd say about law is why I think it's a great subject to study at undergraduate level or as a career is it's so applicable, and the skills you gain from studying law or being a lawyer are so transferable. Kind of the basics of being a lawyer or studying law is analyzing the law, solving problems, and creating solutions. They're kind of the fundamental building blocks of what you would do in a law degree or as a career and as a lawyer. You're kind of reading the statute, you're listening to your client's problem or listening to a problem and trying to figure out, what legal rules can I apply to solve the problem, and then you come up with a solution that you would deliver to your client. And that's basically all it is, just applying various different types of rules that have been created by Parliament or another international body into a specific situation in order to come up with a result that is fair to as many parties as possible. That's what it is. And that's very, very useful to many different careers, whether it's consulting or investment banking, or you want to go into politics in the future. And many politicians have been lawyers. Even Liz was also a lawyer in her previous life. So it's kind of also another career trajectory. As I've said, solving problems for clients. That's the basics of it. And I think specific to commercial law, which I'll talk about later, which is very much what I do and what I will be doing for the next 10 to 15 years of my life. It's very fast-paced and exciting. So the firm I'm going to be working in, most of the big law firms in London, you're working on super exciting, fast-paced deals or cases with the biggest companies in the world, whether that's Facebook, Google. If you're interested in sport, the Premier League, Manchester United, or Liverpool. If you're interested in fashion, the biggest fashion houses, you can really work with companies and firms that are on the front page BBC News or the Financial Times, and that has a really cool sense of job satisfaction that I don't think you can get in another job. Maybe banking, but I think law is a little bit more glamorous, and you're also not looking at numbers, which is not something that interests me. And finally, international scope. So if you're thinking of moving down to London, perhaps thinking of a career at a law firm in London, most of the law firms operate with multinational clients. So you'll be working on international deals. So by what I mean by that is you can have your company operating in Japan, for example, and you can be working on the deal from London. So you're talking to Japan every day. You may have another one of your firm's teams in Singapore, another one of your firm's teams in Hong Kong. You may have to fly out to Tokyo or Hong Kong, depending on what the deal wants. Like those kind of really interesting international aspects of the role also attracted me. As I've alluded to before, careers in the law are very varied. You can become a solicitor or a barrister. I'll get into that. Those are the two primary forms of a lawyer in the UK. But also, if you study law, not interested in being a lawyer, but you're interested in kind of the academic side of the law, you don't have to pursue it. You can go into accountancy, banking and finance, various types of business roles, government roles, politics, and academia. So off the top of my head, my friends from university have gone to a range of places, including investment banks. Some of them are studying further and going into academia. Some of them are going into consulting, which is when you kind of help companies solve problems, but from more of a business perspective. And some of them have completely abandoned the law, have gone into something like accounting or something like that. So it's very, very varied. Okay, I think this will probably be the most helpful and applicable for most of the people on this call. So this is applying for a law degree. Now, bear in mind, I have done some research before this, but I applied for my law degree 4 years ago. 4 years ago? Yeah, I've just finished about 4 years ago. So my advice may be slightly out of date, but I do think, speaking to friends, doing some research, it's not changed too much. So this is for applying for law at undergraduate level. I'll explain how you can become a lawyer through a non-law degree in a bit, but this is to apply for law as an LLB. So in the UK, the qualification you get is LLB, which is Bachelor of Laws, and that's when you do law at undergrad. So for GCSEs, contrary to what you may think, there are no subject requirements. You don't have to do humanities, you don't have to do law as a GCSE, as long as you get a good mix of A's and A stars. I should have updated that, 7 to 9s. And you don't have to take, more than 9 to 10 GCSEs. You do, how many ever your school allows you to do, and you get, very strong grades. So between 7 to 9, you'll be fine. You don't have to get all 9s as well. 7, 8s, and 9s. Let's say, you get half 9s, half of them are 9s, a few 8s, and a few 7s, and that's completely fine. Just a good, strong set of GCSE results and no subject requirements. In terms of A levels, all the law schools in the UK only want 3 A levels. You don't need to do 4. And usually they want a mix of between A's and A stars. So the most common is 2 A's and an A star. Or also ABB, but the A and A star was referring to kind of the top 15, which most of the people in the school will be applying for. In terms of A-level requirements, again, there's no A-level requirements. For example, in medicine, you do need chemistry. In law, you do not need any subject requirements. I have friends who have done chemistry, biology, history, and have done law. But for myself, I did history, English literature, and economics. And I know a lot of my friends, history was a very common one because history involves, you know, reading sources, analyzing sources, sort of like coming up to conclusions, and that kind of somewhat mimics what you'll be doing at undergraduate level in a law degree. So history is quite common, but you do, again, as I said, you don't have to do a certain subject. Do whatever you like, and you'll get a good grade in. I can't stress that enough. If you are interested in a subject, you're likely to get an A star in it, then really go for that, because the universities are looking for A star, A, or not A star, AA, sorry. So whether you get that in history, economics, English, or you get that in biology, chemistry, psychology, it's fine. But A-level law generally is not really seen in a positive light. So if that is an option that your school provides, I wouldn't go for that. It's not something that universities like. They don't think it's like something which is you're strong enough that you can do as an A-level to apply for undergraduate law. So I'd stay away from that. The next thing, which I'm not sure if many of you know about, is similar to medicine. For law, we actually do have an entrance exam, like a test that is a standardized test that all prospective law students will do, a little bit like the UK CAT or the BMAT. And this is called the LNAT, and it's used by universities in addition to your A-level requirements, your what's it called, projected grades, and your personal statement. The LNAT is also a very strong indicator of you as a candidate. Now, the LNAT you usually will do in your October of year 12 or October of year 13, depends on the school and depends on whether you're applying for Oxbridge or not. And it's worth speaking to your school about that, and seeing, well, number one, thinking where you want to apply and when you should write the LNAT. And also, I'm sure your school will give you guidance as to what specific time to take it in. I took mine in October of year 12. But you can do it in October of year 13 as well. What the LNAT involves is two parts. You have I think it's a 1 hour multiple choice questions part of the exam, and then you have an essay. And the multiple choice questions are testing your ability to analyze information. Is that same word? So it's looking at your ability to look at whether there are assumptions, what deductions you can make, what inferences you can make from a piece of text. So a common LNAT past paper question would be, there'd be a long passage of text about something very random, could be a newspaper article, could just be an essay, and then there'd be 5 questions based on that specific essay. For example, a question may be, is X's argument strong, relating to something in the text? And then there'll be 4 choices, yes, no, maybe yes, maybe no, something like that. And you have to choose the right answer. And in terms of that, the way to prepare for the LNAT is genuinely just practice. It's not something you can necessarily prepare for over a really long period of time. It's not like a GCSE. It's an entrance exam where you need to do a good amount of preparation. So doing various different practice papers, which you can get from Amazon. If you literally just search LNAT practice papers on Amazon, the top 3 are really good. Reading maybe a little bit about critical reasoning, which is the skill that's tested here, and perhaps doing a bit of wider research. If you want to do a course, you could do a course. I mean, in my opinion, it is a bit of a waste of money, but you can do a LNAT course as well. They are provided. And the LNAT basically tests natural ability to read information, analyze information. But it's something you can learn through doing practice. It's really not something I would be worried about. The second part of the LNAT is also an essay, which is usually based on some sort of current affairs issue. I can expect maybe next year's will be something about the monarchy or something like that. It's very kind of current and topical, and you have to write a short essay explaining your position and arguing for something, which is, again, what lawyers do. And the way to prepare for the essay is using your skills from school, and how you write an essay in school. The exact same skills apply in terms of creating a position, having an argument, and giving a lot of evidence for your argument. But I also think if you haven't already started, it's a good idea to keep up to date with the news and current affairs, not only for the LNAT, but also for your personal statement. The earlier you start, the better, because through maybe spending 15 minutes reading the news, on your way to school, on your way back from school, at lunchtime, just 15 minutes, on the BBC News or any other type of news website, trying to understand what's going on in the world, reading different articles, understanding different ways that authors write articles will really, really help you. Okay, and then the next thing, from what you can see on my presentation, it seems there's a lot of steps to apply for law school. It's not that bad, and it's not as bad as medicine. But the next thing is your personal statement. So for all undergraduate degrees, no matter what you're applying for, you'll have to write a personal statement, which will be sent to the 4/5 universities that you apply to. And a personal statement is about a page, and the main kind of reasoning behind having that on your application to a university is outlining your reasons for the degree, why you want to apply to the degree and why you're a good candidate. So the key things you should include in a personal statement, aside from the usuals of it being very well written and well structured, is good evidence that you are very aware about the subject and you have a strong interest in the subject. So for law, for example, what people often include to show that they are really interested in the law, like interested in the issues of the law, is perhaps doing some work experience or voluntary work. So work experience you can do at a local law firm. I did it at 2 local law firms in Nottingham. I know people who did them at local law firms. It's not a prerequisite. You don't have to do it. I do think it is useful though. And in terms of managing that, it's just a case of either, asking around, seeing if you have a friend of a friend who has a friend of a friend who's in the firm, or writing emails to the human resources team of a local law firm. It usually does work out, but you don't have to do work experience at a law firm. Even volunteering at a charity shop, having a part-time job, things like that, and being able to link that back to a motivation to the law, whether it's charity shop, you're working in a homeless shelter, charity shop, for example, shelter, and explaining your interest in housing rights. That's a really good way to
Rule of Law,
something.
Tom Bingham, Just Law and Secret Barrister, those 3 books.
I think someone is not on.
Yeah, can you mute, please? Can you mute?
It's all good. And then in terms of other things most people do apart from the work experience is additional reading and research. So additional reading, I've listed 3 books there. Those are kind of the archetypical, everyone reads them books, so they're very good. If you are interested in other books, perhaps something more interested in commercial law, let me know. I have read quite a few that I really like, or if you're more interested in human rights or justice, then I have a few other ones that I really recommend. But these books are a really good starting page, not only to include in your personal statement, but also to start thinking about whether studying law is for you and whether that's a degree you should pursue. But again, if you're interested in other books, let me know. And other things that is good to include in a personal statement are other extracurricular/supercurricular activities you can do that will show that you have the skill set and the interest in applying for law. So commonly, successful candidates for law will have done debating, because that's all about arguing and explaining a position, which is basically what a barrister does. They may have been part of their school's law society, may have been part of Model MUN, Young Enterprise, EYP, may have done EPQ. This is a list of possibilities from people I know and myself, but there are lots of different extracurricular activities you can do. And if you find a way to extract a skill you've done and put that into the law and then putting that on your personal statement, it's great. So, say you play football semi-competitively, or you play for the school team, being able to demonstrate your commitment to the sport and the importance of working in a team and having discipline and having determination, and perhaps, thinking about the tactics involved in football and how analytical it is. If you can draw out those type of skills from what you're doing, and you kind of put that in a really nicely written package and put that in your personal statement, it looks great and it can go a really long way. So, I've also put here voluntary work, community work, dance work. Yeah, same thing. Explain it, extract the skill, and put it on the personal statement. And anything that shows your ability to work in a team or work individually is also great. And again, explaining how that would be conducive to a career in the law or studying law. So, a law degree, there is a lot of independent study. You have lectures for maybe 4 or 5 lectures a week, but you'll also have classes for which you have to prepare yourself, and the ability to self-motivate is very important. And as I say at the bottom, it's very important, make sure it's read by, as many people as possible. Forward. But what I wanted to say is that with the personal statement, I've given, various different examples just for your own interest of what you can include. But this is not an exhaustive list. This is not a checklist. It's not like if you do everything I've listed here and you put it on a personal statement, everything will work out. Make your personal statement as personal to you. It's a personal statement. It's not a generic statement. Whatever you're interested in and where you have a passion, if you explain that to the university and you demonstrate that you are really interested in that and there's some sort of link to the law, that's more than enough. Don't feel like you have to do everything on here or this is a checklist. It's really not. A little bit about Oxbridge. If you're interested in applying to Oxbridge, I did apply to Clare College, Cambridge. In year 13, didn't work out, but I have some of my closest friends are Oxford and Cambridge, so I can give a little bit of advice. So as I hope you can't apply to both Oxford and Cambridge. You can only apply to one of the two. And if you choose one of the two, for example, Oxford, you can only either apply to a specific college or write an open application. Oxford and Cambridge are very, very similar. Same size, same undergraduate colleges, very similar in the rankings, very similar in teaching. So perhaps, how you would narrow it down could be visiting, or perhaps a certain college has a professor who's interested in something you're interested in. I would recommend, if it is something you want to do, attending an open day. It's worth just researching Cambridge or Oxford law open days. There are a few across the year. They're really interesting. I went to one and there was a really interesting talk about Roman law that I really enjoyed. And one thing to note is that there is an earlier application deadline. So when you put in your university applications in, I think it's year 12. I don't know, I'm forgetting, maybe year 12 or year 13. Anyway, the year you apply for uni, most universities will want you to apply in January, but Oxbridge will want you to apply in mid-October. So that usually means the summer before. You probably should have worked on your personal statement. Just be aware of that. So for Oxford, you need the LNAT, which I explained previously, and you'll have 2 interviews. And for Cambridge, you'll have to write the Cambridge Law Test, which is basically like the essay portion of the LNAT. I think there's 2 or 3 essays you have to write, and there'll be 2 interviews. And the interviews, one will be by the admissions tutors, so the people who are kind of in charge of who gets into the college, and one will usually be with some senior academics at the college. Now, it is very competitive. Oxford and Cambridge are incredible law schools. They have incredible teaching and produce some amazing graduates. And, if it's something you're interested in, something you want to apply for, you're interested perhaps in more of the academic side of the law, then go for it. But I just want to stress, it's not the be all and end all. Go for it, try your luck, work hard. And if it works out, then that's amazing. Alternatively, if you want to become a lawyer, or you want to, pursue law and study law and have a career in the law, you don't have to go to Oxford. It's an amazing place to go, but it's not a prerequisite to have a successful career. And I've just outlined here the top 10 universities for law, just so you guys have it on your screen. I'll give people a few seconds to put it down. So these are like the top law schools in the UK. That people go on from there to go to amazing places. Now, life at law school. So let's assume you get through all these hurdles, you get your offer to do law at X university. And what is law school like if you study law at undergraduate level? Short answer is it's a lot of work, but it is very interesting and it is fun. There are a few compulsory modules that you'll have to do, including contract, criminal, tort, and equity, which I've explained at the top. In terms of what the study is like and the degree is like, it's very academic. There's a lot of reading involved. You'll probably have 4 modules a year, and you'll have a lecture for each module, and you'll have a tutorial for each module. So that's 8 hours of lectures plus 4 hours of class. So 12 hours of contact hours, we call them. which may not sound like a lot, but you'll have to do quite a lot of preparation, not only for the lectures, but also for the tutorials. So for tutorials, usually you'll have to read various cases. You'll have textbooks assigned, like textbook pages assigned, perhaps some further reading. So it is, very academic, and it's good to stay organized. Aside from, studying and doing the academic stuff, law school is also very much about what you do outside of class. And there are lots of different types of non-academic opportunities you can get involved with. So I've listed many of them there, including mooting, which is a strange word, but the short answer is it's a mock trial. So it's where you have a fictional legal scenario, and you have to come up with an argument and deliver it in front of a panel of judges, and you have mooting competitions. Those are very popular, very good to do if you're interested in becoming a barrister, but also if you're interested in perhaps going into commercial law or other fields, the skills you learn are really invaluable. Other things you can do: debating, mentoring, various research projects. You can also sign up for law society. So the law society will usually be there at every university. It's kind of like a society. When I say society, by the way, I mean club. It's just a university club. Just semantics. So the law society at most universities will be having lots of different stuff going on, different talks with different law firms or founders, different events. They may have competitions. I got involved with loads of competitions. I'd say the best advice, whether you're doing law, whether you take anything from this talk or not, is when you're at university, just do as much as you can. Really get involved with as many extracurricular things, whether it's sport, whether it's things like this, whether it's photography. Really get yourself stuck in there, because you never know, the friends you'll meet, the skills you'll learn, and nothing goes to waste. So I'd really stress getting involved. And aside from that, if you're interested in commercial law, things become a little bit more complicated, because as I'll explain very soon, to become a commercial lawyer in the UK, so becoming a solicitor, the way to apply for the top law firms in London is through something called a vacation scheme. And that's an internship that usually you do in your second or your third year. And it's a 2-week internship, off the back of which you get a job. Now, to get that internship, which is like the most prized possession at university, there are lots of other things you could be doing / should be doing in your first year. For example, open days at law firms, and also first year schemes, which are like 2-day internships, which you can apply for, via the firm's websites. There are some really, really amazing websites and resources out there if you're interested in going into commercial law. It may seem like a really stressful process. It's not. There's plenty of stuff on the internet that can help you out. Oh, I'm just gonna have a sip of my coffee. So I've already alluded to this, so I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but in terms of different types of lawyers, in case you're not aware of the difference, there are 2 types of lawyers in the UK. You have solicitors and you have barristers. I'm going to become a corporate commercial solicitor. So a solicitor is kind of like a GP, in that they work in a firm, so they work in a team with lots of other people, and they provide advice directly to clients. So they don't work in a court, they work in a law firm. Clients usually come to them with some sort of problem or some sort of thing they want to get done, and the solicitors will guide them through the process from start to finish. And so you're employed by a law firm, and you may go to court depending on what department you eventually specialize in. Comparatively, a barrister is an advocate. So they are the people inside the court who, if the case does go to court, some sort of problem can't be settled, has to go up to the top level, and you need a judge to give a very direct result, then you'd need to hire a barrister, who is the lawyer who goes into court and argues for the client in person. And they tend to specialize in certain legal areas, and they are more academic. The role of a barrister compared to a solicitor is more to look at cases and look at the law and come up with an argument. Whereas a solicitor's role is a lot more business heavy, especially in more of the businessy department. So it's more, your client may want to acquire a smaller company, which is called an M&A, which is called a merger or acquisition transaction. And a solicitor will provide the legal advice, do all of the documenting for that, but will also provide kind of business advice. Is it a good business decision? And that's another big difference. Also, something to note is that a barrister is usually self-employed. They're not employed by a law firm, which is great because you're in charge of your hours, you're in charge of when you work, how long you work, what deals you take on. And for many people, that flexibility is very attractive. But on the other hand, being self-employed does mean you don't have the knowledge that you have your salary coming every month at a certain day. And that's a decision you would have to make when you're applying and thinking about your career is, do you want to have the flexibility of being self-employed, or do you want to have the security of being part of a firm? Another thing to add is that although these seem mutually exclusive and two separate things, people do move between them. So you can become a barrister after being a solicitor for a while, you can become a solicitor after being a barrister for a while. It's just a case of writing an exam. Role of a solicitor, I've mentioned it, probably kind of understood the gist of it. So a solicitor guides a client from start to finish on some sort of problem or some sort of thing they want to get done, and they want to get done legally. So if you think about any sort of like business transaction, let's say Google wants to acquire a slightly smaller cloud computing startup, for example. And if you're a solicitor and the client comes up to you, so Google comes up to you and they want you to help them acquire this startup, the role of a solicitor will be advising the clients on whether it's a good deal, is this a worthwhile startup to invest in, and then the solicitor will conduct legal research, so looking at the startup, looking at are there any legal problems in the startup? Does the startup have an impending lawsuit against it, or are there some legal issues, or there's some agreements that haven't been signed, some contracts that are not really in a good place, and bringing that up to the client. And if the client says, I still want to go ahead, I want to acquire this startup, then the solicitor will draft agreements. So in the UK and in every country in the world, if a company or a person wants to do X and they want it to be a binding agreement. So if I say, I want to borrow your computer, but I want it to be very binding and I want it to be enforceable in court. So if I want to borrow your computer and you don't let me, then I can take it to the court. For that, you need a lawyer because you need it to be put into an agreement, which is a contract agreement, the same word. But that's a legally enforceable document that only lawyers can draft and write. So in this situation, Google would need various agreements to be drafted so that they can acquire the startup. And if the startup then says, no, we don't want to be acquired, then Google can go to a court and say, hey, there was an agreement in place. The startup has broken the agreement. So that's the draft agreement. And in that case, if the startup doesn't want to be acquired and says no, goes against the agreement, then you'd employ a barrister to go to court and argue for Google, and a solicitor would instruct a barrister in that case. And the solicitors who are involved, if there is a dispute like that, are called litigation solicitors or litigators. If you've got suits, Harvey Specter is a litigator. And as I've said previously, if you're a commercial solicitor, there is a lot of business development involved in terms of helping a client make business decisions and go forward with certain plans they have. And another key thing is helping clients with regulatory compliance. There's always new sort of regulation, new things that firms have to do, whether it's, write reports on their carbon dioxide emissions, or write reports on their diversity and inclusion, or make sure that they aren't involved in money laundering. And there are various different types of regulatory compliance and things that have to be written that lawyers do. So that's very much summarized what lawyers do. Now, going into more specifics may not be as useful since I'm kind of assuming most of the people in this call are more of a junior level, probably in the looking to apply for law rather than actually being in law school position. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but this is for those who haven't been convinced by me selling a law degree and perhaps want to become a solicitor. They kind of like the glamorous life of advising clients and traveling. you don't have to do a law degree. So to become a corporate solicitor and work for these amazing law firms in London, such as the one I'm going to be working for, there are two routes of doing that. So the first route, which is what I've kind of been saying to all this time, is the LLB route. So where you do a law degree for 3 years. Now, if you manage to do an internship in your second or third year, you secure a job, which was previously called training contract. Now it's called qualifying work experience. But when you secure a job where you're going to be starting at a law firm at a specific date, then the route you would go is it's not instantaneous. You have 1 year between your undergraduate and you starting your job where you do a postgraduate qualification called the SQE. So the SQE, if you're aware of the bar system in the US, is very similar. There are 2 sets of exams you have to write, for which you do preparation via a course provider. Your law firm will arrange that for you. And then you would write SQE1, SQE2, and then you have the skill set and you've gone through all the training to become a trainee solicitor. So then you would do your qualifying work experience, which is previously known as a training contract, which is 2 years where you work at the firm at 4 different departments. Now, I'm not doing that. I'm the last year to do a different system. There's always new systems coming up nowadays, but I was in a different system called the LPC, which is basically the SQE, different abbreviation, but meant that now I'm finished my 3 years of undergrad. So see the top bubble, I finished that. Now I'm going to start my 1 year of postgraduate training called the legal practice course / the LPC. And after that, I'll be starting my training contract this time next year. And I'm going to start working for 2 years as a trainee solicitor. Now, if you're not convinced by law, you don't think it's for you, perhaps studying about rights and justice and statutes, it doesn't excite you, then that's fine. Doesn't mean that a career in commercial law or a barrister, as I will explain in a slide or two, is closed off to you. Now, with the new system, I'll explain the old system very briefly, but with the new system, you can study a non-law degree at undergraduate level and become a commercial solicitor. So, for example, you want to do a BA in history, history undergrad or English undergrad, or perhaps you want to do something completely different, economics undergrad. You can do that for 3 years, but then after that, in your second and third year, you'd still have to apply for internships, which are called vacation schemes. And if they're successful and you get a job off the back of that, your route will then be a little bit different to the law LLB graduates. So usually it involves a year of doing a conversion course, which is previously called the graduate diploma in law, which is where you spend 1 year doing all the compulsory legal modules condensed into a year. And then after that, you basically be in the same position as a LLB student. And that was called the GDL. It's been replaced now by something called the Extended SQE Prep 1. Now, after that, you would then spend another year writing your SQE1 exam and your SQE2 exam. So that stays the same. It may change in the future. So if you get my gist, if you do law, it's like law and SQE, and then you get a job. So it's like 3 years undergrad, 1 year postgrad. If you do non-law, currently market is saying it's 3 years plus 2. 3 years undergrad, 1 year conversion, 1 year postgraduate LPC type of thing. And then you start your job. The 2 years involved in non-law may change by the time some of the people in this call do get to that position. So it may even be 1 year. Now, in terms of asking yourself, and something I asked myself as well when I was in year 11, such year 12, was, do I really want to do law? Do I want to do history? And then just do a conversion course. Back then it was a conversion course. It was just a year. It'd just be another year to my overall career trajectory where I could do history and then do a conversion for a year. And then I basically have done a law degree, and then I could go out and basically do other things relating to the law. And I think a question you have to ask yourself there is, academically, committing yourself to 3 years, are you in a position where you want to commit to 3 years of studying legal systems and the law? And that includes all types of law, from criminal to public to contract to equity. Do you want to study all of that, get a really good understanding of all of that, and perhaps have the option to take law further academically or practice law in countries abroad, then the LLB is for you. Because if, for example, if you want to work in the US, then doing an LLB is probably the better option, because you do need 3 years of undergraduate law experience. But if you're not interested by that, like the idea of studying about the rights, the books I've suggested don't really, pique your interest, that's also fine. Then do something that does interest you, but just be aware that in your second and third year, if you want to become a solicitor, corporate solicitor or a barrister, we'll get into that in a moment, you will have to go the extra mile in terms of applying for internships. When you're at law school and you're applying for a career in the law, you're surrounded by other people who also want to do that, and all the resources, the environment you're in will help you in terms of pushing you towards doing that career. So for me, I always had access to different resources, events, teachers who could really help me. Whereas if you do history or something like that, not everyone there will be aware of what a career in the law involves, / be interested in. In that way, you do have to self-motivate yourself, and you do have to try a bit harder in terms of going to events, getting involved, and demonstrating that interest. But if you're willing to put in that work, then go ahead and do a non-law degree. Some of my best friends have done history as a degree, also at King's, and have now got training contracts and are in very similar boats to me. So, it's not like law versus non-law is a big question. As I think a slide in, well, not this slide, but there's a slide in a little bit, will show law firms, so the commercial law firms in London recruit 50% law, 50% non-law. So it's really not an issue. SQE rating, yeah, as I've already explained this. And okay, the SQE1 and SQE2 exams. SQE1, forgive me if I get this the wrong way around, but one of them is more testing one's legal knowledge, and one is testing practical skills. And it's like any other type of exam. For example, the bar course in the US, you have to study. There are various textbooks, various courses. If you get a training contract from a law firm, and they will usually sponsor you to do an SQE course at a provider, for example, University of Law. So you will get all the training. Even if you don't get a training contract, it doesn't work out for you, that's fine. You can still do the SQE self-funded by yourself in your own time. It's a very flexible route, and I think it's really good for that reason. In terms of if you want to be a barrister, you want to go to court, do some of the acting, be there, wear the gown and the wig, and argue in court for your client, then if you've seen, there's a TV show on Netflix called Anatomy of a Scandal, and the woman in that, the protagonist, she's a barrister. And if you're enthused by that, you're interested in that, then this is the route you would take. Again, there's been a few changes, so there's a lot of GDL or. And if you do a law degree, then you would do the 3 years law degree. Then after that, most people do an additional postgraduate master's level course. I haven't put it on there because it's not a prerequisite, but most people do either an LLM or they do the BCL at Oxford to become a barrister after doing law. Then after that, you would do something called the BPTC, which is the bar preparation course, and then you'd write the bar exam. Then you would spend about a year working as like a trainee barrister. It's called being a pupil at a barrister's chambers. So you have law firms, which are groups of solicitors, and you have barristers' chambers, which are groups of barristers who aren't employed by the same organization, but are just organized for the sake of efficiency together. There's no profit sharing or anything like that. For non-law, it's a little bit less common to do a non-law degree and then become a barrister. It is very possible, but because being a barrister is so academic, barristers' chambers and to write the bar course, you do need a lot of legal knowledge, which 1 year of doing a conversion course just doesn't give you enough of. You can do it if you're, if you are interested in a law degree, perhaps you're okay with then doing a GDL and then doing an LLM, adding a few extra years to your trajectory, you can definitely do it. But doing law undergrad is genuinely more common. I've heard of friends who have done a London law degree, for example, history or English, and then want to become a barrister, some of them manage it, but it is a lot of work. But it's very similar, except for you have an additional year where you have to do a conversion. So yeah, the BPTC, sorry, I completely got that wrong, but the bar preparation course has been replaced by something called the vocational component of bar training, basically the same thing. A lot of the things, if you look on the internet, there are a lot of changes going on at the moment to make the law more accessible and to make careers in the law more accessible. Well, I agree they're completely becoming more accessible, but the actual labels they use are very similar. The actual content is very, very similar. So if you're interested in becoming a barrister, please do research and further advice and speak to other people. I'm probably not the best person to ask. Non-law route, I've already gone through this. You can apply for a contract with a training contract with any degree. You can do BA history, get a training contract in your second year, do a conversion or the extended SQE prep and go forward. My best friend did that. And as I said here, yeah, 50% law, 50% non-law. Key differences are you would have that extra year where you would do the conversion or the extended SQE prep course. It's only a year. You do it with your fellow colleagues. It's not something to worry about. And it is interesting. It is a bit intense because you're doing a 3-year law degree in 10 months. But the GDL/SQE2 plus providers will help you through that. Again, as I said, you have to make a point of attending networking events, kind of going above and beyond and doing perhaps what your classmates aren't doing, because not everyone will want to do law at a further level. And yeah, you also need to be able to explain your decision to apply for the law. If you do history as a degree, for example, at undergraduate, but you want to become a corporate solicitor, it is worth finding something from your degree or something which ties your degree to becoming a commercial solicitor. Otherwise, some law firms or chambers will be a bit like, well, why, if you want to become a lawyer, so why do you study history? So having a good answer for that, a robust answer for that is useful. From speaking to my friends, perhaps they did a module in legal rights in some country as part of their degree, and that really interested them. They wanted to do the law. Something like that is good, just some sort of connection to make your story more plausible and understandable. GDL, this is not as useful. I only put that up here because I'm not sure if there are people in this call who are in a similar position as me, but non-law. So previously, the GDL was a one-year law conversion course for non-law graduates. You did the 6 core modules in 10 months, and it was a prerequisite before you wanted to. You could do the LPC or now the SQE, and the 2 main providers of the LPC, the SQE, the GDL, and the extended SQE prep course. So all these postgraduate qualifications you have to do before becoming a lawyer are usually provided by 2 universities called BPP and the University of Law. And you probably have never heard of them in your entire life because this is all they do. They do undergraduate, some undergraduate courses, but they do a lot of the postgraduate courses, and they're the main organizations selected by law firms. So when you go to university and if you do law or you want to get a career in the law, you'll hear a lot about BPP and ULaw. I'm going to be going to the University of Law Moorgate next week. Applying for a training contract, less useful for many of you on the call, I would assume, but a training contract, that's the graduate job. That's like when you get a job to become a trainee solicitor, a trainee corporate solicitor at a law firm. Main way to do that is to do an internship in your 2nd and 3rd year, and that's called a vacation scheme, which is applying for a vacation scheme is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. In terms of you have to write a lot of applications, do a lot of interviews, do a lot of like full day in very intense interviews in order to get the internship itself. So they're very, very competitive, but that's kind of the main route of getting a training contract. You can do it in another way called the direct training contract route, but less common. Key skills, I think, to apply for a vacation scheme, and key skills if you want to become a commercial lawyer. So if you see those skills there and you think you embody them, maybe it's a good career for you. And the first thing is commercial awareness. So being interested in what's going on in the world of business and pursuing that interest into reading. So, you know, if you see an interesting deal where, you know, X company, for example, if you're interested in football and you've seen that Roman Abramovich, because of what's happening in Russia, no longer is the chairman of Chelsea, and Chelsea is now went into a bidding process. So various other companies wanted to acquire Chelsea. It's just been acquired by an American man. If something like that interests you, the business involved, the kind of complexities, the different players involved, that interests you, and it really interests me. That's called commercial awareness, and law firms love that. And if you have that, then maybe this is a good career route for you. Other key skills would be organization and time management. There's a lot going on when you work at a law firm. You have to keep on top of it. Leadership, because a lot of law firms will want you to do your own individual little projects, and you'll be doing a lot of things. And communication. And yeah, vacation schemes, I've already gone through this. Training contract, again, I've already gone through this. It's the 2-year thing where you sit different departments, different seats. I appreciate this is a lot of information. I'm really sorry that there's so much information, but I only have an hour. I wanted to get as much information to you, help you all make a really well-informed decision. And so you know how to apply undergraduate level, where to go after that, and what's involved if you want to become a commercial lawyer, which is more personal and specific to me. So that takes us nicely up to 10:56. I will stop sharing. Cool. So yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you found it interesting and useful. As I put in the last slide, please feel free if you have any other questions, like specific questions, non-specific questions, personal questions, anything at all, shoot me a message, either via LinkedIn, or I can put my email, or get my number from Solution Uncle. Just send me a text. I'm not too busy next year. Well, I am busy, but I'm not too busy. So I can definitely help people out. I think I have one question. Do we have to get grades 7 to 9 to get into law? And the answer to that is yes. You do need 7 to 9. So previously when I was applying, it was A's and A stars. 7 to 9 is basically is the exact same thing. You will need to get kind of A's and A stars, and you will need that usually. You don't need to get all 9s, you don't need to get all 8s, but a mix of 7s to 9s is advisable. Any other questions?
Well, this is absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much.
That's okay, no problem. Anyone else?